What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. We've been going through each of the regions to ponder on what could be the missing gym leaders that we have not witnessed in the games. Now, many people have wondered if I would simply pass over the Alola region, but fear not. Just because they do things differently here doesn't mean they're immune to this either. With all of the Trial Captains, Kahunas, and Elite Four members, we see that 13 types were officially recognized in the Alola region when we saw it. I'm not going to count simple specialists of a type that were not a part of the Island Challenge, because otherwise we'd never have to do this at all since any random swimmer would count. So that leaves us with the unclaimed types of Poison, Bug, Ice, Psychic, and Dragon. So let's try and see if we can work out those captains and the various trials they might require. I would say the Bug-type specialist would be the first one, and would be a young woman named Maven. She would be found on Melemele Island. I always found it a bit strange that there was only one trial on the first island, but I'm gonna guess it wasn't always that way. And the funny thing about trials is that, unlike gyms, they almost exclusively happen outside of cities, but rather interesting spots in nature on the map. So I would place a Bug-type trial in Kala'e Bay, or perhaps even starting in Seaward Cave. I imagine you're given a certain amount of honey that you have to rush around the cave to a set number of Cutiefly within a time limit, forcing you to find the optimal path to get it done and defeat them all. Now, since this is likely before you can call the Ride Pager Lapras to surf and fish, Maven will take you to the other side of the bay, and back once you're done facing the Totem Golisopod that's here. Don't worry, it will still have the emergency exit ability, so you only have to survive long enough to get it down to half. Pretty reasonable compared to most totems. But once you've forced the Golisopod back into the bay, you'll fight Maven, who has a Cutiefly and a Butterfree on her team, as well as an Araquanid for good measure. And of course, there are no gym badges here, so she will give you the Buginium Z Crystal. After all, the Team Skull stockpile had to come from somewhere. The next trial will actually be a while away, since Akala is pretty well covered, already having multiple leaders strategically placed. However, I've gotta say, I am disappointed in Ula Ula Island. It is by far the biggest and has fewer trials. What are they doing with all of that wasted space? Half of the island isn't even really populated, so I would put a fair few of them here. This one I would actually place fairly close to right off of the port, still in Mali City, but up at the Outer Cape. This is where the recycling plant is in Alola, and where I would place the Poison-type trial. The captain here would be a man named Saul, who is in charge of this plant. His mission for you is to go inside and see why the plant has stopped its automated recycling. Inside, you'll have to fight some Alolan Grimer, since that's part of what they use to do the recycling, and at the end you'll find a Totem Alolan Muck that's been sucking up all of the energy. I realize this isn't likely to happen every time an Island Challenger comes, but honestly I felt like the Mimikyu was a one-shot thing as well. So after defeating Totem Muck and restoring the plant, you go to battle Saul, who has a Toxapex, so watch out, as well as a Crobat and an Ariados, since sadly all of the trial captains seem to only have 3 Pokemon each. And of course he will give you the Poisonium Z. As for why it is no longer a trial area when we were there, I'm not sure, but perhaps he was called to deal with some of the shenanigans over at the Lake of the Sun or the Moon, and got obliterated by all of the Psychic types pouring out from Ultra Space. But speaking of Psychic, the next trial isn't too far with the Hyena Desert. This area is so underutilized in the Alola region that we saw, I accidentally skipped it until after I was the champion. But it is the perfect place for a trial. The trial captain would be Estelle, an old woman who's been wandering the desert for decades. The trial would result in you navigating the naturally deceitful paths of the desert that twist and turn all over the place. You make your choices on which route you want, and if you can get to the ruins for Tapu Bulu, you made it. Many outside sources have tried to map this desert as well, so good luck. You would then be taken to a spot to battle Totem Alolan Raichu, which would be kind of tough, but provided you can do it, then you'll face Estelle with her Bruxish and her Oricorio on her team, but her main weapon would of course be Oranguru. Some people might say the desert shouldn't have the Psychic Trial, but I'd say it's their fault for not having used it in anything else. And I will remind everyone that this is where the pedestal was found that gave the player the Psychium Z in the first place. Not to mention the old weirdo who said he was from space after interacting with the psychic types Solrock or Lunatone. Come to think of it, Estelle might have something to do with that anomaly, since she too mysteriously vanished. We are not yet done with Ula Ula Island, but for now, I'd like to go over to Pony Island and clean up the Dragon Trial in Vast Pony Canyon. See, when we were there, it had no captain attached to it. So, give it a few months, and I have no doubt that Ryuki will be filling that role. This character shows up quite unexpectedly, but it's always nice to see random people that are so well defined. This man clearly has his own style and a passion for being a Dragon-type trainer. So, assuming that he doesn't stick around that weird gym wannabe place, I think that he'd be a natural fit to take over the Dragon Trial. It wouldn't even have to change, really. You could still walk down the same corridor and fight the same Totem Pokémon at the end. You would just fight Ryuki afterwards to get the Dragonium Z. I'd like for him to retain his own Kommo as well, but if that's somehow cheating to have the same ones, then I would give him the 2 Alola natives of Turdinator and Drampaw, while replacing Kommo with the Garchomp that he's already been shown to have. I feel like Ryuki would definitely become a trial captain in the future, being able to work with the Totem Kommo in a way that the last guy couldn't, since apparently he got eaten like he was in Jurassic Park or something. I realized that his stated goal was to become a gym leader after the formation of the Pokemon League in Alola, but I would like to think that after a while here, he would gain an appreciation for the culture. And I feel that he would especially change his mind after witnessing the might of a giant powerful dragon. Not like that, just the totem kind, since you couldn't get that in a gym. Besides, I've got some pull with the champion, and I think they'd be able to convince him. But of course, there is yet another trial left with Ice, and as I said before, we will go back to Ula Ula Island and up at the top of Mount Lanakila. As I've already mentioned, the Pokemon League was literally just starting when we went there, which means for hundreds of years there was something else up there, and I'm betting it was an Ice-type trial. After all, once again, this is where the Icium Z can be found, as well as the Icy Rock that will let you get a Glaceon, so something had to be going on up there. The trial captain would be Kelvin, a man who feels right at home in this frigid climate. The challenge here, I'm imagining, is using the Machamp push feature that you would have access to by now to move the blocks around and create a path to escape the icy labyrinth. But be careful, because once you push a rock into a hole, you can't undo it. However, strangely, you keep fighting Crabrawler here even though there are no berry trees. But it becomes clear that their king up here in the cold has evolved into a totem Crabominable. So it's up to you to put this creature out of its misery. Once you do, you can then fight Kelvin, who will have a Glalie, but more importantly, the Alolan versions of Ninetales and Sandslash to fight the trial goer. At least I'm assuming that's how it used to go, but something must have happened to make him leave, since his prime real estate got bought out and reworked into the Pokemon League. Which of course is where we saw Kahili as the flying type specialist, but she likely also had her own version of a trial at some point. Possibly over at 10 Carat Hill where you find the Flyinium Z, or maybe even at the golf course to stick with her theme. And granted, some of these options could possibly have been grand trials as Kahunas, if you were to go back far enough, but those are more just standard battles rather than a trial challenge, so not as fun to consider. The trials themselves could be vastly different than what I've discussed, because there truly is no precedent for them outside of the imagination of the captain, I suppose. But as for the trial captains themselves, I believe this to be a reasonable facsimile of the kind of people that we'd see in these roles in the Alola region. What do you think about missing trial captains, kahunas, totem Pokemon, and more? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!